I don't think that anyone should be forced to say anything, and I think that's a big problem that we have as far as regarding the global information space. Is that we have these producers, we have this production like mindset and not a curation mindset, not a reflecting mindset. But what's happening right now? What's happening right now is not always comprehensive. In fact, if you just stay like a water bug on the surface of things, all the time just flitting around here and there, sampling this, sampling that, that bubbled up here, bubbled up there, you're going to be distracted, or you're going to think of information in an entertaining type of way, like that the news should entertain you in some way, it should be dramatic. And that can end up setting conflicting policies by different geopolitical actors into play, and that it's almost like a theater where you have the different actors in the theater. And you're above them, so you're not in their national theater, you're in the global theater. So you can see them. You're in the theater of theaters, whereas they're just in their theater. They're apart, they've been scripted, they're limited. But in other ways, they're not limited. They're the living representations of their brand on this earth at this point in time. So, because they're living people, they can hear this within their lifetime, and they can let go of bad things, bad ideas, bad grudges, and embrace enlightened policy instead. That is ultimately what a journalist does. At least one that is not biased in some way for some reason. A lot of reasons are monetary. Anyone who's ever worked in a company knows that when you're in a company that you're not going to say things that the company doesn't want to hear, period. That is the culture. You have a job because you took the job, and you understand that the job means that doing your job means not getting fired, which means not saying something that people don't want to hear. But see, journalists that aren't in the employ of people like that don't have that type of working relationship, that have the freedom to do that, well, maybe they're not journalists because it's not a profession. Although it is a profession, it's not a paid profession. Perhaps in that case you graduate from journalist to either historian or literary, or there's other ladders up above journalists. Finally, it's not your job to serve one theater or another and say, oh, well, because I'm not getting paid as a historian, I'm going to bend reality for you because it's politically convenient for you to hear praise instead of condemnation. There are consequences of that, which often aren't good for the people who say them, but for the people not to listen to what is said when it's true, even if it feels painful initially to hear that one was wrong. Why can't one let that go? Let the self go that is so injured about the truth. You don't need a fragile, irritated self that cannot understand the truth and cannot live within the truth. And this is the problem with system capture. If you think of yourself as a system, your own institution of the mind being captured in some type of negative feedback loop, negative or positive feedback loop, like I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing the wrong thing, but they're mixed up. Because then you get into the realms of vested interests. These you want to be a worldly person. You want to be involved in worldly politics and not have to deal with people that are greedy. Well, you're in the wrong profession, because greedy people are going to storm you. They understand that especially modern states have a lot of benefits for a lot of different reasons that have nothing to do with good governance. If you want to simplify it in an abstract way, which I always recommend doing because it lets you see things clearly, it's about self-enrichment of these people that ultimately is the outcome. So you have a minority interest profiting at the expense of the institution. So in government, that is a bit of a problem. In other places, it's normal. And it's normal not in a good way. When I say normal, I mean normal as bad. For a super normal person, for example, I'm not being eaten alive by bacteria. But it's normal in some places to be eaten alive by bacteria. So that's my level of normal. Like normal is the real world we live in, which doesn't have a lot of idealism in it. See, idealism it starts in the mind, especially when salespeople pitch you a utopia. Oh, it's the whole world. All the problems are going to be solved if we do this toxic, retrograde, hateful, and misguided thing, such as believe all mankind is going to get along, want to live together under all conditions, and have all the same things. And, right, you can just keep going with it, and then you can put little fairies and Tinkerbells and create cartoons and just keep making this implausible future seem more and more plausible or more fantastic. To the people that these showmen, the state showmen, are selling their serfs. Now why not just call them serfs? Because if we look back to the historical term, we see serfs didn't get a fair break in the courts. There was a completely separate law. There was much more transparent, which led to a reaction against it, which is why today it's not transparent. Oh no, the courts are propaganda is the courts are equitable. The reality is they're not. If you get caught up with them, you're going to get robbed. If you're not connected, that's the reality. Sorry to tell you. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. But just think of me as someone who fell off a cliff, like multiple times, based on a sign that was misleading. And so you might find me annoying, telling you what's potentially ahead. But that's not my problem. My basic humanity demands that I dutifully tell my fellow human beings what could adversely affect them in certain cases, especially where there's a multiplicity of screens and stories and different representations of things, shall we say, based on the interested parties involved, where there's a power differential. So the people, oddly enough, that benefit from such antisocial practices don't want social repercussions for them. And they'll only have them if the information is made publicly available. And so you see these spirals of self-interest of minorities just scrambling around like mad, trying to put the fires out of truth. On the other hand, we're stuck in this earthly realm with these types of people. And so you can also, if you're completely, if you've reached total enlightenment, or you get close to it at least, as close as you can see them as deluded. And you can have compassion on them, even the worst ones. Who was it? Sulimaga? The worst ones. That was more or less what the story conveys. The worst man, the worst woman who wakes up and understands that they were deluded and starts living a civilized life, they are changed. They are fundamentally different. They don't have any stain of the past. Now, some people will not be able to get over that. They won't want to accept that. People who have been injured, I understand it. But truly wise, enlightened people not only are capable of doing that, have done that. They've proven it to themselves. They didn't need to prove it to other people. They couldn't prove it to other people. In fact, the story goes on. The whole depiction, the whole explanation of it is quite insightful. Did not the villagers, when he went out on Bindaba, which is collecting alms, some villagers recognized him and threw stones and everything else. So he had to live with that. The reality of this realm. It wasn't as if everyone said, oh yeah, sure, we believe the Buddha, right? We believe him. No, even then, with a living Buddha walking that they knew, they didn't believe him enough to not try to seriously injure Sulimaga. So, yeah, and you know what the explanation for that was? It was karma. It was his karma to experience all of the terrible things. And also to experience terrible things after leaving that life behind. That the karma, you just can't snap your fingers and everything goes away. That's not how conditionality works. But from the standpoint of his earthly and also beyond this earthly existence, if you want to look at things in a wider lens, like again, using the theater, the global theater perspective as an example of high-level abstractions, then you're doing yourself and everyone else a incalculable generosity by letting all of the defilements go. And it is great. You see people, this was one of the things I was reading up on the East End, how it developed over the centuries, and people were living in just abject, horrible, horrifying poverty. And a lot of modernity can be seen in that. Also, people just working for nothing that had good jobs and were involved in the textile industry, for example, and then that went belly up based on global trading patterns, and you had all these former textile workers with no work all congregated in an area because you don't move, oddly enough, when you don't have any money. And so these weren't just small little factories or operations. We're talking in some cases 20, 30, 40, 50,000 positions where you had foremen, you had responsible, competent, dedicated people that just were left all at the same time with nothing. You got to think of their families, their children. So you look into these micro subcultures of urban spaces, even in civilized countries. Now, how do we know even about these conditions? Well, our culture uh, provided us this insightful material thanks to a working scientific and humanities community of humanities. See, if the humanities lose their direction, lose their focus, start focusing on toxic things instead, you will just kill it off. So now you also have to think, well, why would someone do that? See, a lot of this is counterintuitive. Well, you can see, you go up the food chain, well, if you have people telling the truth, and then people that don't benefit from the truth, then you can see, okay, those are the people that would benefit by killing off the entire culture, not just one or two dedicated individuals that were cultivated in such a culture that they find off-putting and perhaps potentially dangerous or precarious for their precarious operations, which fundamentally are ethically incompatible with any type of functioning operation long term. But again, their time frame is the course of their lifetime. See, this is what not thinking in terms of other lifetimes can bring nihilists. They don't care. There's going to be no consequences. It's all about winning in this life no matter what. So that's a discredited school philosophy, but it's vulgar in that it's also very common. So you can find this common vulgar, just like you can find weeds and you can find dog poop where there's a lot of dogs. It's sort of around, it's sort of in the air, not just where it is. Sort of taints the environment. So you have worldly people that have learned to discount philosophy and the humanities, and also then truth on top of that as a concept. No, there's no truth. There's just this. I came up with this truth right now. And why? Because this despot is putting bucks in my pocket. So this is my truth right now. Now, when despot number 4 comes along, then I'm going to, shift in this way. And it's become an industry. And some people are deluded enough to think that there's some type of evolutionary or positively evolutionary process behind that somehow legitimizes that way of doing things, but they're wrong. See, they're not just deceiving others, they're deceiving themselves. The deceiver is self-deceived. And then if we think in terms of delusion and then the type of energy, wrong energy they put into that type of delusion, then you can see the amount of damage potentially such people can do in the course of their lives, just completely. I compared it once to a lawnmower, just running around, like, bzz, making noise. The perpetual lawnmowers. Wherever they are, they're just going through flower beds. It's all about lawn mowing to them. Bzzz. It goes into the pool. So imagine it's a bzzz, and then it just somehow shoots back up because it's got human characteristics. It's got human agility, human will, human brain behind it. But there it is, bzzz, and you can see them now. Imagine it's not just one. It's 2, 3. And then real humans are rare. Real people with real values from the real humanities. Rare, just pure gems. Like, just imagine just like a boulder of jade but diamonds, like, you can't hold them. That they're that heavy type of valuable repositories of valuable wisdom. And yet, instead of being cherished by everyone, the people selling diamond dust, they want you to not even think that such things are possible, let alone exist in their time. They'll throw up a big old dirty tarp right over the green jade boulder. Don't want anybody coming and running away with it, using it for their own wealth, when in fact they want to be the middleman between jade dust and jade, the jade boulder. So in a lot of ways, it's unfortunate, and the people that they're able to net or keep within their atrophied cultural zones, they're functional zombies in a lot of ways. They know how to eat. Some of them, they do go to the bathroom in designated areas. They do basic tasks, but anything above that level of humanity, don't expect it. In fact, expect a lot of like what you wouldn't expect normally from a well-meaning, well-functioning person. For example, oh, it's Friday night, let's all get wasted. Well, what? Why do we need to do that type of culture? When did that type of culture become civilized? Oh no, everybody's doing it, you know? Sure, you developed then a lifelong habit based on that type of dumb culture. That's really dumb. It's really dangerous, really stupid. So how did it happen? Well, at this point, we don't know. A lot of these things just develop on their own. They might come from factory culture. 2 days off. It's understandable. You can see how it could happen. Doesn't make it good, it makes it normal. Normal, right? Vulgar. Vulgaris. You think of vulgar. Oh, this is somebody saying vulgar. Just like people say cynic. They don't know what cynic means. They know their social version of the word cynic. Oh, cynic must be bad. Well, how many cynic philosophers have you read? Like their entire collections. How many? Like, is there a raise of hands? Now, how many have used the word cynic or cynical in their lives? Raise of hands. So, yeah, I don't know what to call you actually, except not well up on the words you use. And I typed that dilemma into my computer, and it typed out normal. It's normal. So forgive yourselves. But certain delusions or certain ignorances, they do have bad effects, fatal effects, especially for your psychological and spiritual well-being. So it really does behoove you to pay special attention to religious practice, and religious in the sense of habit. Like, I do this religiously, I do that religiously. Well, what do you do religiously? Are you complaining religiously? Are you religiously irritated? Are you religiously running to irritating things? Well, then you need to change your religion. And you'll say, no, I can't do that. Well, yes, you can. People are, look at all the different religions you got out there today, or at least what they call religions. It's just a habitualization into what values? Is that right? Common values? Can that be right? Well, how about the value of being able to accept the truth? And being able to accept the preconditionality of disappointment in this earthly plane. And that is the quintessence of normalcy. You don't consider that to be something rare. Don't consider it to be something especially disturbing. There's a room, you go in it, there's a 50-50, and there's no screens on the window, and it's summer, and you're in near cow pastures. There's an 80% chance there's going to be at least one fly in the room. A perfect world, there would never be a fly in any room ever that you're in. Now, we might be working on that technology. Like, I can consider I can imagine a bodysuit that scans the air, sends out like a photon to anything it identifies as some type of negative thought, for example. Not a fly, because see, having compassion isn't really congruent with the practice of shooting them all down. But of course, if it's not you shooting them down, it's the automation of Dhamma, of a practice. It's your antiviral virus program that, here's this crap, this socially programmed dunderhead crap that was deliberately designed to not work, shooting in my face here. It's not me, it's not mine, it's not them, it's not theirs. There's the inevitability of not having to do with people that have been so debased is just a reality of good practice, which does not seek out irritation unnecessarily. And yet, total absence of irritation is impossible in this realm. Many times not. When you're in a solitary situation which is reasonably comfortable and are irritated, that's your problem. So it's good to put yourself in, just like going into a cold room at a spa. You ever been in one of those? There's like the hot sea salt banya, and then there's the bath, and then there's the ice cold room, and you go in for like 5 minutes or however long you can stand it and switch between rooms, then you go back into the hot room. Well, going into, let's say, a solitary forest situation, which is survivable, reasonable, it doesn't have to be luxurious, it can be basic enough, and there is nothing there but you, and you're being irritated by things. You need to go through those one by one and weed them out. And they're going to surprise you. Like, here I am thinking about this thing that is irritating. Why am I doing that? And it takes a little bit of confrontation. But if you do it with compassion, you do it with consistency, you do it with patience, you'll get through them one by one. And this is the good news. They usually come one by one. Our brains are not overly complex in that way, especially when you're in a solitary environment. You can see it operating better, because when other things are going on, other variables are in play, we won't come to that conclusion. We'll say, no, this person annoyed me. When a lot of times it had nothing to do with the person. You were annoyed already based on the mental interference going on in your mind, and they just showed up, and it set off what was inside you already. It just made it surface. They were the catalyst. So it's not them, it's you. That's the way to think of it. But this is where a lot of people get stuck in the practice, because then it just becomes a mechanism for self-criticism, which is not the point. The point is to see it and let it go, and get in the habit of doing it. So there's a automatic tennis ball machine shooting the tennis balls. Well, the beginning is it's hitting you right in the face every time. But then you'll see that after a certain amount of time, you'll see them and then dodge left, dodge right, dodge left, right? And they just keep missing you. They are being shot, but they're not connecting. And you're not connecting with them. You're not reaching out. You're not moving your head to hit the ball. You're adopting the reverse practice, which is to avoid the ball. And this is super counterintuitive for Westerners because we're in that factory of the mind mode, which is here's a problem, let me solve it. Here's a next problem, let me solve that. Or here's this piece of equipment coming down the production line, let me deal with that. And this is how we're habitualized in industrial or post-industrial environments, if not in the factory, then in the schools that were built like factories to condition people to work in factories. So if that tennis ball machine is negative thoughts and your mind, it might be to the left, like you don't even have to move, and it'll miss you, but we're trained to move our head to the ball. So we have that going against us as well. That type of conditionality is working against us when the tennis ball machine is generating negative thoughts, negative ruminations, irritations, craving. But not just craving. See, everyone's like, I see craving. You might be one of those austere people that don't have a problem as much with craving or desiring. But you might really have a problem with aversion. And aversion is the same tennis ball machine and the same tennis balls as far as the concept go. It's just aversion instead of craving or the other hindrances or defilements. So you might be sweet-tempered and have the greedy personality complex, or you might be the tough person that has the aversion affinity. And so it really does take some time. It really does help you if you take some time and pull back and try to see what type of person you are. What is it that you're having a challenge with? Well, there's certain techniques you can use to counterbalance that. Again, if you're a little bit on the tough, rough side, the whole wishing all living creatures well is so difficult. It's so difficult. It really does seem totally impossible. But it's not. You need to think in terms of it just being an abstract, ridiculous exercise. And you're doing it because it's prescribed. It's like just when you have cold sores in your mouth or something, or you have a sore throat, gargling with salt water. It's a weird remedy, isn't it? It's not intuitive. Nobody wants to gargle with salt water, but it works. Especially if you don't have super access to super modern drugs and whatnot. Hot salt water does blazing wonders. It's a real low-tech remedy. And it does work. But you do feel stupid doing it, at least temporarily. That's the way you need to approach it. And for people on the craving and greedy side, thinking like, well, why should I punish myself? Why shouldn't I reward myself? Abstaining from things, for example, no eating so you get to eat all you want from dawn to noon, and no eating after that, period, ever, under any circumstances. And you'll think, this is crazy, this is prison, but why can't you do that? It's super simple. Just requires a little bit of discipline. Little bit. In a area that doesn't matter. In fact, if you do stick with it, you're going to turn out buff. you're going to be looking great. So why would you get in the way of that process happening in the easiest way that can possibly be imagined, by not doing something? So, but for some people, just impossible. Just they're lost cases, they can't do it. They're too weak, they're too dumb, they're too distracted. That's normal. See? Normalcy. Normalcy is mediocre. People play a normal game of pool. That's not a good game of pool. It's not skillful. It's normal. Hit the ball here, the ball goes there, just all day long. It's a normal bad game of pool. But here's the good news: is you stick with these types of techniques and you become an expert pool player. You become an expert practitioner in spiritual matters. You live a skillful life. The rewards of that need not be conveyed in any other way than to imagine. Just even if you can't imagine it, the rewards of that are life-changing on every level, and not just life-changing in this world, because see, we give it even a greater emphasis, that it goes into millions and billions and indeed infinite lives. But coming back to the earthly plane for one moment, if you approach it from the standpoint of generosity instead of just criticism, then you can also completely change the constellation of your landscape, mental landscape. Which is to say, you were criticizing people that were either incapable of doing what you expected, which was a perfect world, in effect, a perfect idealistic world. And so that's just very unfair, as well as being very unskillful. And it does take non-self to do that. But this is not by attacking the self that did that, but just letting that self go, and letting self go in general, and also letting unrealistic expectations under the circumstances. I wanted to eat a whole bag of popcorn from Tennessee to Kentucky, but the bag ran out halfway. Throw a fit or get over it? Can you look back and say, well, it was a good time. I should have appreciated that popcorn more when I had it. But see, then you can get sentimental about things. You can fall into that pit of despair. So there's lots of normal doors into hell realms. Normalcy, mediocrity, it's normal. Of course, the hell realms, then you're getting through the normal door and you're making things worse. So because we don't do that anymore, because we just spun on our heels, we did a 180, now everything looks fine. We walk away from that, and then we think in terms of just theory, pure theory. No need to build any of these gigantic, world-changing societies. It can just be the company of the mind. A mind that is empty. How about that? It doesn't have to be filled with beautiful things, although it is, because it's cultivated, because it's curated, because it is walled off from even normal things. It's normal that somebody drives past your door at this time and hits the horn. Well, not in my four walls it isn't. Maybe it is. And when it does happen and I don't get annoyed at it because I don't even hear it at some point, then is it a problem for me now? When it was a problem before in some unskillful iteration of self, a self, not you or yourself. Not the you or yourself of now. It was then, isn't now. You're not crying about an empty bag of popcorn. Doesn't even cross your mind. It's absurd now. Think in terms like that. When you can just abstract it, this is irritation and this is unskillful. And therefore, I'm dropping it, I'm moving on. And yet still you can retain a generosity towards all peoples, all living creatures of the world. Look, isn't that a wonderful perspective to have? If you can truly have it, if you don't let cynicism poison you to the effect, and I use the common vulgar term cynicism that is misapplied in every instance. But in this case, it's impossible to use any other word. I mean, what's impossible? It's lazy to use this word inappropriately, and yet it's commonly understood. So don't let cynicism tell you you can't look at the world that way, or again, the wrong type of cynicism. But your overly idealistic world that leads you to make unskillful actions that have tremendously negative downstream effects for normal people, don't rationalize, do a post-rationalization or make the world the bad place when you're conducting clear and easy wrong action, which has negative toxic social side effects such as immorality. You go outside without your pants on, it's inappropriate. Now you want to push that boundary, you're being inappropriate. Social cohesion is a good thing. Things that work against social cohesion are bad things to a degree, not to the point of conformity of ideas and political platforms. That, hell no. But there should be basic social decorum, social unity, social cohesion, and you abstract that away, no matter how idealistic you think you are, you're committing massive crimes that do have let's say causality. It has massive negative side effects. So you want to overlook that as an idealist? I don't consider you an idealist. I just consider you a misguided fool, which that not only commits horrible acts thinking that they're not horrible, but thinking at some point there's going to be great results because of that, when causality doesn't work that way just because you think so. So people who are so dogmatically, ideologically flipped and determined and committed to wrong ways of thinking, it's a question whether or not such people, and if those people do make it through all of those barriers, then you're dealing with a defunct venue or institution. And the question is, it's not the first time it's happened in the world, so what do you do under those circumstances? So that's the type of thinking we need now. We need an unraveling of these asymmetric attacks that have been cultural in nature. And that's just the abstract way of seeing it. From a high level, there's nobody pointing fingers. There's no personalities associated with that. That's just a general plan. How it will be implemented, and if it's flipped on its head. For example, I'm saying this. you get a malign influencer involved in this process, they'll take everything I said and then they'll inject the wrong things so they'll attack the wrong things and protect the wrong things using the same system. So you have the wrong people that get into a system of cultural curation like that. You have the equivalent of a life-threatening civilizational disease. And so that are just completely disguised in gigantic, never-ending smoke bombs of plausible deniability. Oh no, I'm not toxic, they're toxic. Whataboutisms, just go through all of their shtick, and you can see them applying it in real time. At least now that we have the technology, like social media, you can see it in real time. Before, that might have been impossible. So what they're trying to inject or apply, misrepresent is in fact poison. So you don't go to funky doctors, so why would you go to funky venues and think that something funky couldn't happen to you? But see, the problem is the layers of deception. Oh, I thought this venue wasn't tanked, but it is. Why is it tanked? Well, the people who do it are, again, not just deceiving others, but in massive amounts of self-deception on all of these matters for various reasons. So, and they do go into angry mode. Like, you challenge them on certain points, they get angry, and to the point of physically attacking you and feeling themselves justified in doing so. So what type of robot human torpedo is that? Well, that's the ones we're dealing with. Just like drones flying around, we didn't think it was a problem. It's a bigger problem than people thought, like a gigantic problem. Life or death threatening problem, mass chaos problem. Now, if we look into places, perhaps again going back to like North Africa, what this whole Arab Spring thing, there were so many horrible things happening all at the same time. I didn't follow it, but I'm now getting sort of a feeling for what happened is they took this extreme polarization thing and ripped the entire society apart. So civil society. Now it's reverted back to medieval times. So neo-barbaric medievalism was the result of that. So there's winners and losers, but let's just say there's an exponentially more losers, exponentially higher amount of losers than winners. Like, I don't know, we could probably today we could quantify exactly how many winners there's been. If it's over 10,000, I would be super surprised. And then you need to look at the total population. What is it? Is it 40 million? So should any type of country with 40 million have that type of disparity in wealth and civilization? Yes or no? Is that would you typify that as a successful system or as a failed system? So now I'm just using that as an example. I don't know if there's even a point of fixing Libya in its current form. It was wrecked before it got wrecked in the modern version of being wrecked. And it is a tragedy because they did seem to think there might have been a chance to do something completely different there. But there is a certain amount of quality of the citizenry that you need to have for systems like this to work. And the history of North Africa is total and absolute disaster. just if you're a historian and you don't know about the nature of these disasters, and you're not into the nitty gritty of it and the real reasons for it, and the not the ideological smoke screens that are being put up all the time around these things, you'll see clearly that bad things happen in the world on mass, intergenerational, civilizational scales. And it is chilling, but it's a massive opportunity to take all of those truths into account without being personally necessarily agitated by them, but engineer systems that do have a certain level of self-defense and cultivation built into them so that things like that don't happen, as it is a potential variable in a variable world that a whole bunch of people get together at some point in time and roll over the more civilized areas. And then just the results of that are manifest, just there for everybody to see, just a different way of existing. Different section of the world that is predetermined to have these types of conditions into perpetuity, which are on every metric hardly civically aspirable. So yeah, all these damn researchers that have gone through these wrecked institutions that now comprise the majority of Western civilization. Interesting question, civic desertification. So it's already happening, probably in your crummy town or wrecked city, brain dead oligarch run cities. So looking at that, if you reverse engineer that, and then you see, like, for example, all this horrifying social engineering combined with lawfare and neo-Leninist campaigning, that's like an entire branch of pestilence that needs to be completely not just identified, but needs to be shut down, altered, changed, if you want to get out of a demographic nosedive. And people, of course, there's a big topic nobody admits exists, except in some departments, maybe in Russia, but they're not listening. They closed their doors and wrote a big Z on the outside. This is what recovery via war is the idea they have. Well, okay, you're in a war, but guess what? The war could end badly, and then you're out. And then so the new people that come in, they need to think about civic desertification, and they need to change that policy to irrigation and other permaculture principles that are counterintuitive, like not henpecking men into non-existence. You throw. Maybe they do this in some place. They throw like a dead rooster or into one of these chicken coops, and the chickens come and just pick the carcass clean or something. We've got entire defunct institutions filled. Who knows if it's what's going to happen? It's a dice roll at this point. And it absolutely is a dice roll in many places in the West, whether or not they will survive. Absolute dice roll. And the odds what maybe not in the favor of survival. If there's places that are rolling 20% possibility of recovery from all of these toxic engineerings. And remember, these people, they are all in on denying that there's a negative downsides to their policies when they're absolutely manifest and the data proves it. And yet, they don't want anything to do with that data. They will be stuck in a whataboutism loop till the end of time because they're not genuine, they're ideologically captured partisans. And so, no, they're not like you. If you're like me, and they're not like us, they're completely committed to being a toxic influence. And they'll just explain away. They'll say, no, data doesn't exist. Oh, it exists. It exists in a big way. Like some people say the demographic decline in Russia is of biblical proportions. That's what I heard recently. It's not getting better. So in my world, that is a crime. That's a gigantic crime. And there are criminals that are connected to the crime, and they need to be identified. And it's possible there will be prosecutions. Like I read recently, there's this concept, legal concept, if you make a law that you shouldn't retroactively apply it. I don't agree with it in the case of cultural attacks. I think that is one area where if you identify a vector, you have to just assume that they were using it deceptively, and that because of that, there's no free ride for them going forward. That's a way of identifying them. So you can say, oh, this is what they were doing, and these are the people who did it. And so when a war tribunal comes up, all those different types of people need to be added to the list, and the list should not be inconsiderable. In fact, the list should be considerable, perhaps even more than the military operators. And people say, oh, this is unbelievable. Well, who gave the military operators their orders? Who were the people that were explaining away everything they did? Was it the humanities? Humanity. I don't call them humanities, but let's say humanities simulating experts and influencers. Yes or no? Here we had a city run everything great, no sewage in the water, and it was at 1 million. We got all this cultural documentation, all these great things they're doing with bulk. Don't even got to get out of the car. The whole place looks like it's been bombed. So you can understand how these people love propaganda. They get their little film crew together real tight, roll to one location, they take 5 takes, shoot that out. That's the story. They love that. So anybody involved in that, they need to be put on the list. They earned money while real people starved to death, desertified themselves out by the thousands of millions. And so all those numbers, they're part of that. They made that happen. So if there is a crime and punishment, do see the crime and do think about the punishment. Don't just get the soldier that was pushing the button at the end of the line. And again, they trashed Germany, let's say, after the war, in all types of different ways. They think they're going to get away from a similar spectacle. They're wrong. It should be a spectacle. Each and every one of them is guilty. And yet, again, they still have time to change, don't they? Till they're put on the dock, I guess, or until they're finally indicted. But even if that day never comes, let them be indicted in the public realm. Because not only did they destroy their own people, but they went out internationally on a rampage with their crappy Leninism. And it's still here. It's festering. It's taken away jobs of thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands, millions. Taken away their jobs, their lives, their culture, everything. So they want to have a big parade. They want their little horrible, ugly monuments, and they want to slap themselves on the back. Well, that's what they're going to get put on them historically. Not only were they bad, but when they had the chance to change, they went the other way. So, but of the people in the West being victimized now by all of these intrigues, look, forgive yourself. Try to recover. Try to heal. Try to get past it. And I know there will be people that get past it. Certainly people that are probably might not even be born today. I do think there is a certain resilience in humanity and also in the West. I do think this has just been just a horrible, mistaken time in many ways. And yet, when was that never the case here? So it was a time of good and bad. And the good can get better and the bad can get worse. And the causality between them remains to be seen. But as far as in the public domain, the domain they want to trash, well, why do they want to trash it? Because it condemns them. They have no legitimacy, no validity, no morality, no ethics, no nothing. So if you let them do it, you're a part of it, then that is the causality that you will reap. And yet for the others, wonderful world awaits you. A future without all the slime and toxicity and accusations and personalized politics and she said, he said, and all those other things that made life so unenjoyable in this time. They're not going to have it. Just like we don't have people running around with polio or wasting away with tuberculosis or syphilis. So to that bright future, I say, live well.